Oh, we're here. Stephanie Gray, we're here.
David Bereit. How the heck are you?
I'm doing great. Oh my goodness. Who would have thought that a few days ago we would have come up with I didn't come up with the crazy idea. You come up with the idea and here we are. Stephanie, I want to start in a minute with an opening prayer before we get started, but before we do anything else, I would love for you to share a little bit about how this whole crazy thing came about.
Well, so David, you and I, obviously, we get asked a lot to do different interviews and podcasts and all that stuff. Of course, you often host things, and of course, sometimes we know the people that are chatting with us and interviewing us, but it's really nice in the pro-life movement over the years when you meet other leaders and they don't just become colleagues in the battle, but also friends. It's nice to partner up with them. And I just thought David is so great on camera and hosting things. Wouldn't it be fun to do something similar to what we've done with other people, but kind of unique with this whole concept of here's my jar, questions in a jar.
Woo-hoo.
Okay, wait, what is the size ratio reference here? If this is my hand, how big is your jar? I don't know. Your jar looks bigger than my jar. I don't know.
It might be a touch bigger, but
Probably because you're American and everything's larger in the United States.
Well, Canadians are much more conscious of space, so I can understand why a Canadian jar would definitely be smaller. And I spent a number of years in Texas, so as you know, everything's bigger in Texas.
Everything's bigger in Texas, absolutely. So I thought, what if in a sense you're not interviewing me, I'm not interviewing you, it's kind of this mutual shared just chit chat. But we have random questions. So questions from a jar. Also because I like party games. So you can, I don't know if you ever dinner party, boxes that you put on the middle of a table. And when you're having a party, there's a bunch of different questions you can pull from and just get funny conversation going with different guests over a meal. I have this fun little book called If, and then it's just a whole book of questions to provoke conversation. So you would pick up the book, open it up and ask a person in your house, if you could have dinner with one person in history, who would it be and why? And then there's a million other questions like that. So I've always liked that idea. And so I thought, well, this would be fun to kind of do a spinoff of that. But I also like to rhyme. So then I thought, okay, questions from a jar and from afar. And people watching us, they don't have a jar, but they're from afar. And yeah, I know it's cheesy.
No. I love the cheesiness of it. And my only concern, though, is I didn't realize you had a book of questions. And so now, my jar, you can see I don't have all that many questions that I'm going to be asking you.
Mine is more full. I think mine's more full. And some of mine are lengthy. There's a big one in here. This is a big one, but we're not pulling it out yet.
That's going to be...
It's just an American-sized question.
There you go. Wow, I'm a little bit kind of scared of what that question is going to be. So, hey, before we get any further, would you mind, I just would love for us to start with an opening prayer. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Let's come. Okay. Yes.
All right, I'll start with that, and then feel free, Stephanie, if you want to add anything in. Everybody's going to realize very quickly this is completely unscripted. This is live without a net. So, all right, let me start us off in prayer.
Okay.
Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this time we have together tonight. Thank you for this questions from a jar and questions from afar event. And thank you for Stephanie's creativity. I thank you for her amazing giftedness of communicating the pro-life message. And I've learned so much from her. And I'm so excited for many people to get to know her or get to know her better here tonight. Thank you for everybody who's participating in this time. Please bless all of us as we're in the midst of this coronavirus lockdown. Be with those who are affected by this terrible pandemic, those who have lost loved ones. And dear Lord, as we are starting to see a little bit of an ease to the lockdown, we just ask that you continue to protect people, be with those on the front lines who are helping to serve those in a time of need, and particularly for pro-life advocates and pro-life ministries that have been hampered in their ability to reach out and help mothers in a time of need and help children who are at risk of abortion. Dear God, we just ask you to please protect and provide for all of these advocates. And tonight, let us have a time of fun, a fellowship, and also a time to learn from one another and to encourage and inspire one another. And we just thank you for all of these things in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, in whose name we pray.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
All right.
Okay, so Stephanie, we already have some people in the comments, and I don't know that you're seeing this, but I know.
Well,
Go ahead. Yeah, why don't you tell us a few of the people who are commenting here, because I don't want them to feel left out.
Well, that's great. So hello to everyone. I see everyone saying hello here. So that's great. I see we've got Gary, Russell, David, Patty, Virginia. Everett, Washington. That's the West Coast. Very nice. We've got a Canadian here. So yes, hi to all of you. We look forward to hearing your questions as well as the ones that we have for each other.
Okay, so one quick ground rule here. We're going to share, as Stephanie mentioned, we've got some questions from our jars, and also, more importantly, we want to answer your questions. So in the chat here on this video, I mean, we're just going completely unscripted here. Submit your questions, and the way we're going to do this is I've got questions to try to stump Stephanie. She's got questions to try to stump me, but then we're going to go through the questions submitted in the comments, and I'm going to ask some of Stephanie, and she's going to ask some of me, and we're going to just have a lot of fun with this. So if you don't get involved in the comments, this is going to be a really short questions from a jar event, right?
Well, I don't know. Remember, I might have a smaller jar, but it's more full, and I've got some American-sized questions.
And that question may take 45 minutes to answer. Oh, my goodness.
I don't even remember what I wrote on that one, but anyway.
Okay. Well, Stephanie, gosh, I feel like since you came up with the idea, you need to ask the first question, although I'm kind of scared which one you're going to ask me first.
Well, it's funny. I was thinking, there's the classic saying ladies first, but I was wondering what that would mean, like ladies first in asking the question or ladies first in answering the question.
Well, how about you decide? You're the lady. You decide.
Okay, I'm going to ask first because anyone who follows anything I do in the pro-life movement knows that I emphasize the importance of question asking. So
wait. I didn't even think that before you dive into your question, I got to tell people why I think you're such a rock star in the pro-life movement.
You're stalling.
I am stalling. Hold on, just one second. I've got to share this. So for everybody who's joining us, Stephanie Gray is one of my favorite people in the pro-life movement. She is one of the most articulate, inspiring leaders. And when we first met, it was back, we were figuring it out. It was the Arizona Right to Life convention back in 2007, 2008?
I thought it was 2007, but I looked up my meticulous Excel records, which have a note of every talk I've ever given, and it was 2008.
My wife is laughing right now as she's watching because she's going, David has no meticulous records. David has like piles of stuff all shoved into folders. So I'm so glad you kept record of that. So I heard Stephanie, we both spoke at this convention. I heard Stephanie give this amazing series of presentations. I was in awe. And I'd been in the movement for a number of years. I first got involved in 1998, so this was 10 years later. And I learned things I had never heard before. I was so inspired. She conveyed things with such an articulation. And so ever since then, I followed everything that Stephanie has done, the organization she previously led, her efforts now, her speaking around the country and around the world. And then when she gave that famous talk at Google headquarters, the Google talk that went crazy viral, an amazing video, and then watching you speak to the Students for Life conference, the March for Life conference, all these other events. I just want everybody to know, if you don't know Stephanie Gray before tonight, follow this woman wherever she goes. Love Unleashes Life is her website, .com, right? .com?
Mm-hmm.
Follow
right.
whatever she does. If you ever get a chance to hear her in person, if you haven't, do that, and you are going to be absolutely blown away. And she's the best question asker on planet Earth.
Oh yeah, you're setting yourself up real well for the questions in here.
Hoping you'll go soft on me on the first one.
You are very kind. And of course, I remember our first meeting probably as powerfully as you did. I also, for those of you listening, I feel like people probably, maybe they watching know more of David than me. I'm just the lowly Canadian here. But I had the great privilege of meeting you, as we say, so that was 12 years ago, I guess, 2008. And it's interesting you mentioned that you got involved in 1998, because that's when I first got involved in the pro-life activism on my university campus. And then it was 2002 that I went into full-time pro-life work. So it was just a few years later that I met you. And our meeting also stands out in my mind because I was blown away by you. And I'm not just saying that because you said that about me, but as I emailed out to the people that follow my work and told them about this event we're having tonight, I said to them that I am very picky when I recommend other speakers, and there's a select few that I will recommend, and you are most certainly one of them. And I knew that day in Arizona when I heard you speak. And so I've just been so blessed, not only that day, but many other times over the years, hearing you winsomely and powerfully communicate in a way that really grips the heart and motivates one to really want to change what they're doing in their lives. So it's not just that you can tickle our ears, but you can actually motivate us to live our lives differently. So I just, praise God for how the Holy Spirit has given you a charism to be able to teach. So it'll be fun to see how you teach others in answering the questions I'm going to ask. Now, I'll admit, some are personal rather than professional. Maybe they will be funny or embarrassing in your answers. I don't know.
I'm a little worried.
I'm going in. I'm going in here. I hope we can get through all my questions because I'm only going to randomly pick. And so I want to get through all of them. But anyways, here's what we've got here.
Okay.
What are the biggest challenges faced by pro-life groups amidst, so this is a serious one. What are the biggest challenges faced by pro-life groups amidst the coronavirus lockdown, and how can they overcome them?
Biggest challenges faced by pro-life groups during coronavirus lockdown?
Yes.
Okay. So a couple of thoughts that come to mind. First of all, let me address the one that probably is the more glaring and the one that just kind of jumps out for a lot of groups, which is the financial need. I was reading in the Wall Street Journal just a couple of weeks ago that charitable giving in the United States is down 75% overall. And so pro-life groups are certainly not immune to that, as most pro-life groups are 501c3 nonprofits here in the States. Those are charitable organizations. So I think that many groups are facing challenges to their funding. And when I read that article, I actually...
Oh my gosh.
Oh my goodness, we're back! Look at this!
David, this is so stressful. Well, we're down to 11 people, so God bless the 11 people.
These are the most faithful 11 people that there are. And
there were 12 apostles, and then there was Judas, popping them down to 11. So the 11 faithful apostles.
Indeed. Well, I'm curious. I saw somebody in the comments. I saw a lot of things. Technology issues are so annoying. The perils of live streaming. Kathy Humbarger in Indiana. Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah.
You're right. The enemy of life does not have the power to silence truth. We stand in the power of the Lord. River, that's awesome. Oh my gosh.
Preach it, River. Yeah.
Yes. And then somebody said to me, and I agree with them. They said, "You, what was it? You have the worst luck." Stephanie.
I saw that one. Yeah. And then, not surprised, a glitch has happened. Yes. Okay.
So the question was, what are groups having to struggle with? They're having to struggle with internet connection issues right now. This is the biggest challenge.
Well, and I was thinking, this was not at all a setup, but it could have been a setup.
It could have been.
Demonstrate the answer to the question. And given that you are the one controlling this live stream, David, is that how you were answering my question?
Yeah, I was trying to dramatize the situation and create an example that would be so memorable. People would for days say, wow, when they were trying to illustrate the challenges people are facing, their own live stream went down. Okay, so let me answer that quickly. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, go. Before
you know what I was about to do, which is terrible. I was about to jump in and answer the question.
Okay, so my quick answers, and then I want to hear your answers. Financial challenges are something that groups are having to struggle with. The one thing, though, I'm seeing, and right before this, I was doing a live stream event with Mary Shelter, a maternity home ministry that I'm serving on, and I've done a bunch of other live stream events. A lot of groups that are able to make their case to their supporters right now are thriving. One pregnancy center I worked with in Corpus Christi, Texas, they did an online event. They had to shift from an in-person event to an online event in a week and a half, and they ended up raising $352,000, more than they'd ever raised from an in-person event, because they were willing to innovate. And it's not just about online events. Here we are demonstrating that online events can be flaky, but it's the willingness to innovate. And going back to my point that I was making about, online, groups and groups that are nonprofit groups and the struggle of the drop in donations, I really believe those groups, pro-life or otherwise, that are not willing to innovate stand the risk of extinction. The other thing that I think is critically important for pro-life groups specifically to understand is that the change in the dynamics does not change the importance of your mission, it just changes the delivery of your mission. So whether it's a maternity home that no longer could house people together in a house because they can't have that many people together, so what did they do? Instead of closing doors and saying, well, we just have to hunker down and wait, what they did is they said, we've got to rent hotel rooms. We've got to help
Wow.
provide rent subsidies. Or a pregnancy center that says, we can't see every client, but how do we set up a phone bank? And how do we help people? And how do we serve as many as we can? And how do we help to regroup so that when we come out of the coronavirus lockdown, we are better equipped than ever before? So innovation and understanding that the importance of our mission hasn't changed, but the delivery of the mission may have changed. So those are my answers. I want to hear yours.
Well, I wasn't that prepared to answer that question, although I guess neither were you, and you answered it really well, reinforcing why I was wowed by you in 2008, David Bereit. But no, what I was going to say was what just happened there reinforces that I think the biggest challenge facing pro-lifers is interruption to getting our message out, that things are getting in the way of our ability to connect with people. Now, as you've rightly pointed out, we need to get innovative when those things happen. We need to work hard at correcting the problem, as you magically did, and praise the Lord, we're back working this live stream. But yeah, the challenge right now is, how do I actually communicate with people? Because in many places, abortion is still considered an essential service. And so people are getting pregnant, people are going to abortion clinics, and pro-lifers are thinking, how do I communicate with you? How do I direct connect with you? But a great answer, David, and thank you.
Thank you. Okay. The American-sized jar.
The American-sized jar.
The American-sized jar. We're going to pull out a question. I have no idea which one this is. I hope we get a fun one, because we started off with a serious one there.
I know. I wanted to just, you know.
Oh, it's not. It's a serious one, but that's okay. We'll work through it. Okay.
I wonder if people online, I'm just going to quickly check this chat group going on, if people are going to ask us fun questions. But anyways, we'll go with the serious one you've got.
Okay. So this one actually was submitted. Somebody sent me an email when I put out a word about this event. Somebody sent me an email and said, throw this question in the jar. So I just want to say to that person, your question was actually in my jar. Okay. What is a good, solid response for those who say, are you going to adopt this child? Are you going to pay for this child? Implying that if you don't, then killing the child is justified.
Okay, good question. So when people basically say that, what they're doing is they're attacking the pro-lifer rather than the argument the pro-lifer is giving. It's considered in philosophy an ad hominem attack, where you attack the character rather than the argument. And basically, they're presuming that if pro-lifers aren't going to adopt every child that's at risk for abortion, then it justifies abortion. And the point we want to make is that whether we adopt children or not, that doesn't justify homicide on innocent human beings. It's kind of like, I remember actually one of my mentors, Scott Klusendorf, once saying to me years ago when I first met him, it's as though, a man beats his wife and the neighbor discovers this and goes and confronts the man for abusing his wife, and the man looking at the neighbor saying, well, unless you marry my wife, you have no right to tell me to stop beating my wife. Like that makes no sense. But the other point that I would make in response to that question is, in my experience, pro-lifers do adopt children. I have more friends than there are fingers on my hands who have adopted children. Some of my friends have adopted children domestically. Some of them have adopted children overseas. Some of my friends have adopted infants. Some of my friends have adopted several children from a sibling set. Some of them have adopted older children. So in my experience, pro-lifers are adopting children. They are helping women not only through the unplanned pregnancy, but well beyond. But whether someone is willing to adopt or not, it doesn't mean homicide is acceptable. I think, for example, of a friend of mine who was once debating with someone who said, well, have you adopted children? And actually, my friend had adopted a child. And so he responded to the woman who said that, yes, in fact, I have adopted a child. And the woman looked at him and said, well, why haven't you adopted two? And so it goes to show that someone who asks that question generally isn't really sincere in their approach. They're just trying to overlook the heart of the issue, which is whether homicide is an ethical response to a crisis pregnancy.
Amen. Well, I don't have anything to add to that. I think that was a fabulous answer, and I would agree with you. I know so many people in the pro-life movement who have adopted, and I think that the way you've articulated it is as clear as can possibly be. So the person who submitted your question, I hope you got that answered.
And actually, yeah. Well, we'll leave it at that.
Now you've got me curious.
Well, no, I was just going to add a story, but then I'm like, well, I don't want to say everything in one answer because there might be other questions I'm asked that trigger this. But just in light of that, I will say what came to mind is I once met, actually just in the last year, a young woman. She was in her 20s, maybe 28, unmarried, involved in the pro-life movement. And she came under the conviction a few years prior to that she should foster, even though she was a single woman. So she, over those few years, until I met her a year ago, fostered over 20 children and adopted 2 of them, all the while as a single woman in her 20s. So
Wow.
That is a powerful illustration of someone who is responding to the crisis in a very self-sacrificing way. So someone who would ask that question, have you adopted children? If you haven't adopted children, that justifies abortion. What would that person say to that young woman? Because she clearly has fostered children, adopted children. And so because they wouldn't be able to dismiss her pro-life perspective due to an unwillingness to adopt because she has adopted, then what would that pro-abortion person's objection be? And then we see what the real issue is for them.
Excellent. And Stephanie, this is yet again why I was so impressed by you back in 2008 and ever since. So, wow, I'm a little bit scared as you finish up your answer because...
That's great. It's my turn to ask you a
the
question.
Canadian jar is about to come out.
I hope it's a fun one.
Hey,
Okay.
I have to say in the comments, I'm sitting here, and first off, thanks to everybody, your patience for our little technical glitch there. And LA, who's been getting really involved in the comments, has $5 that my next live stream is going to crash too. Wow, I don't know whether I should be collecting on the I could crash it and then just get the $5, and then I could buy a cup of coffee at Tim Hortons when I go to Canada.
There you go, which is a Canadian coffee shop.
Wait, what is in Canadian dollars? Isn't that like $17? I don't even know what the currency exchange is.
Yeah, it is not so good for Canada right now. I think it's like 1.4 or something.
Okay, all right.
Okay, another serious one, David.
Oh man, we haven't had a fun one yet.
That's because we're baiting everyone with the intensity, and we're going to end on a light note. Maybe that's it.
That's what we're supposed to do, I guess so.
Okay. All right, David, this is your chance to give constructive criticism.
Uh-oh.
David, what does the pro-life movement need to do, A, more of, and B, less of?
Ooh.
Ooh.
Okay, what does the pro-life need? I'm going to answer the less of first because that's going to be shorter, and then I'm going to go into the more of because there are 2 things that just popped right to my mind. So on the less of, we need to do less of talking and more of acting. We have a lot of times where we have pro-life leaders and groups and people who, think that just posting on social media is sufficient, and yet there's so much we can do to help mothers, to save children, and to be directly involved in saving lives. Another thing that we need to do less of is infighting. And I know this is probably a broader audience, but there are a lot of different pro-life philosophies and different approaches, and many of them are wonderful. But sometimes some people think my way is the only right way, and there can be multiple right ways. And instead of spending time poking at each other, we need to instead say, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Abortion, let's go after solving that problem. So those are my less of things. The 2 things that I think we need to do more of, and forgive me, Stephanie, for just a moment for having a bit more US-centric approach to this. So number 1, I would say we need to have in the US more effective state organizing. Because whenever Roe versus Wade is eventually overturned, or even if it's chipped away at, what that will do is throw the decision more and more back to the states. We have some great national pro-life organizations. We have some amazing local pro-life organizations. We have some decent and a few strong state pro-life organizations. But we need to be ready. The moment Roe versus Wade is overturned, that doesn't end abortion. We need to be ready to organize state by state by state. And in many of the states in the United States, abortion would immediately continue on, or in some cases like California and New York, it would get worse. In a few states, it would be blocked, and then in some states, we'd be duking it out. So I would really encourage everybody here, if you're in the US, and forgive my American-centric response to this, be more willing to work with others in your geographic region. If you're a pregnancy center, work with other pregnancy centers, work with the people who are praying outside abortion centers and sidewalk advocates and those who are involved in legislative and educational efforts, but really start forming those networks now because they're going to be critically important when Roe versus Wade is overturned. So that's number 1 on the more. Number 2, and it was actually ironic because maybe this is why I thought of it. One of the people who's in the comments here is Kathy Humbarger. Kathy is one of my heroes. Kathy runs a Right to Life group in Indiana, in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And a few years back, she started to realize that we got all these great pro-life laws passed in Indiana, and yet she was seeing violation after violation at the local abortion center that wasn't being enforced. Violations of the laws they worked so hard to pass. So Kathy and her team started to document these violations, and then they went to the enforcement agencies and reported these violations, and they got that local abortion center shut down. They got the local abortionist's license revoked. So what I think is needed, and thankfully I know Kathy well enough to know she is launching a brand new organization that is helping pro-lifers. What I think has been a missing link in the States has been enforcement. We can work really hard to pass good pro-life laws, but if nobody is enforcing those laws, they have no teeth to them.
Yeah.
So if we can enforce those laws, then we can shut these places down, not based on anything we do, but by their own crimes and misdeeds. And so Kathy, shout out to Reprotection. I'm so excited for people to learn about that in the coming weeks here, safeguarding women's reproductive health by closing down abortion facilities through their own misdeeds. I'm so excited about what she's gonna be launching, but I think that's a missing piece. People pray outside abortion centers, don't even know what to look for, let alone where to report it. And if they could do that one thing, many times they could close those places down, not only by pulling women away and saving lives on the front lines, but by documenting these abortion centers are doing horrific things and simply holding them accountable for that. Those are my answers.
Great. Excellent. I'm not even going to add to it because it was wonderful. And the one thing I would say is, you mentioned part of your answer was American-centric, but that same philosophy can apply for, Canadians with our provinces or people in other countries, is to focus what is immediately around you more at a community level and interacting and coordinating at a community level. I think you offer some valuable insight.
All right. So does that mean it's time?
Yeah.
Okay. Come on. I'm keeping my fingers crossed for. So LA in the comments, instead of putting up a $5 bet on whether our next live stream will crash, put up $5 thinking that we're.
Are we even getting questions online yet? Okay. I see the $5 comment.
Oh, okay. All right. So here's my question. Let's hope it's a fun one. We're going to find out.
All right.
Okay. This is kind of a fun one. This is going to get a little personal with Stephanie Gray.
Oh, okay.
If you were not a pro-life speaker and activist, what other career would you choose and why?
Okay, yeah, okay.
Ooh, this is going to be good.
I mean, I do find my work very fulfilling because I have a teacher's heart. And so I love to educate and see people, influenced in a positive way by what I am able to share with them. So that is very rewarding. However, there are lots of other jobs that I have thought of would be pretty cool. So a few years ago, I went to Disneyland for the first time with a couple friends. And after spending a whole day there, and it was like late afternoon, early evening, my friends and I walked around a corner and suddenly it was the daily parade at Disneyland. And what do I see but the actors playing Mary Poppins and everyone dancing to Mary Poppins music, like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. And I was like, oh my goodness, I am seeing the next career I want. I want to be Mary Poppins in the daily parade at Disneyland. So that would be one of my answers. And then related to that,
but before you go on, I've got to clarify: Disneyland, Disney World, Euro Disney, which Disney?
Maybe I would travel from one to the next to the next.
Ooh, fly with your umbrella.
Oh, very good. Well played.
Okay.
Well played.
Sorry,
yes.
I just had to ask.
And then kind of related to that from a musical perspective is I love music and I'm a bit of a musician. And so I have thought that it would be really cool to be a music therapist, especially because as I have expanded my topics, not just speaking on abortion, but also addressing the topic of assisted suicide, I've done some volunteering in hospitals and different places with elderly people, many of whom have dementia. And I've seen the power of music to, you could say, unlock the mind of someone with dementia, where someone can be very confused as to who they are and where they are. But when you start to play the oldies, the types of songs they would have listened to decades prior, they perk up and begin singing word for word. So they often can't remember much, but you play a familiar song from their younger years and they can remember the lyrics. And so I've seen music as a powerful way to connect with people who otherwise might have a more difficult time connecting. So that is a long-winded way of saying Mary Poppins and the Daily Parade at Disneyland, Disney World, or Euro Disney, or alongside being a music therapist. Those would be my other career choices.
Ooh, well, I actually...
Do you want to give your answer? Or do you want to answer that too?
Oh, what else would I do? Oh gosh. Well, before I answer, I'm glad one of those answers you gave queued up another one of my questions I have in the jar, so I hope we get to that one. So what else would I do if I wasn't a pro-life activist? Golly. You know, when I was a kid, I always wanted to be a park ranger or a veterinarian. Now, I'll tell you when I was really young, what I most wanted to be, although my wife would never allow this, I wanted to be a herpetologist, which is a person who studies snakes. Yeah, that's
well, I don't know if I'd be friends with you, David,
exactly.
if that's what you had done.
Well, I realized as a very young boy that girls weren't real fond of people who were fascinated with snakes, so I was like, not as a career. So that's when I thought I'd be a veterinarian. And I still do love animals, but I wouldn't want to do it like where I had to do it. So maybe I'd be a park ranger. I really love the outdoors. I love God's creation.
Park ranger.
Yeah. Think how relaxing it would be. I probably would. And I'd hold the Smokey Bear, sign saying...
I'm thinking Smokey the Bear.
Yep. You never know. So, well, that's maybe what I'd do. I don't know.
Okay. Great. Well, that means it's my... Oh, wait. Oh, is it my turn to ask you a question?
Your time
then?
to ask a question. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Dun, 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 dun,
we need that drum roll.
Dun, dun.
Okay.
Okay. This question could be serious or light, professional or personal. Finish this sentence about yourself.
Okay.
People would be surprised if they knew that.
Gosh, there's lots of things. The one that comes right to mind, a few people know this about me. I'm a total Star Wars nerd. I mean, big time. So like even in
How big? Because I'm not at all. So
I'm in my little studio with a Darth Vader candy holder. And yeah, my family buys me all these trinkets, and my family rolls their eyes every time any new Star Wars movie comes out because I'm the one who wants to go to the premiere showing the night before and do all that and wait in line and get tickets and all of that. And usually, and this is why a few people would know this about me, I now have this thing where before a movie comes out, I'll Photoshop my face into a Star Wars movie poster, and I'll share that with some of my friends, and they just think, wow, this guy's a complete and total nerd. So I'm a nerd on a lot of fronts, but particularly when it comes to Star Wars and even what Disney's done with it. And we could have a big debate about it. I know we could really light up the questions if we start getting into some of these recent movies. We won't do that, but I think that's something most people would be a little surprised to find out about me.
Now, if you are a big Star Wars geek, then you will recall what I can only vaguely recall, which was that there was a Star Wars movie that was released, let me think, it would have been around maybe 98 or 99 and 01, because that's when in my summer break in university, I worked in a movie theater.
Ooh.
And I remember it was either 98, 99, 2000 or 01 that I worked at the movie theater where there was a big Star Wars movie release. Do you remember that? Was there a big movie that came out at some point in those 4 years?
Well, the first three came out in 1977, 1980, and 1983. And yes, I know the dates they came out.
I was going to say, not those ones, David.
Yeah, but then I think, I'm trying to remember when episodes 1, 2, and 3, the prequels came out. And the first one, I think, came out right in that time frame. So it was probably The Phantom Menace is my guess. And I don't know those movies as well because I've tried to block a little bit of them from my mind because they're not as good as the original trilogy.
I see. So when you say Star Wars fan, you mean those...
Yeah, I still like all nine, but the original three, and then, but,
Okay. Well, yeah, I just remember we did that midnight showing, and we had a crazy crowd, and yeah.
Okay, so it's my turn to ask you a question now, right?
Okay.
So, the American Jar.
The American Jar.
Okay, let's hold that for another fun one. Well, we got to do a serious one here now and then.
Well, no, that's true. We should,
I'm wondering if people are right now on this broadcast going, why did I join this? Oh, actually, can I, there was a question that Jennifer Nicoli posted in the comments. So before I ask my question, I'm going to hold this one. I'm going to ask hers to you, if that's okay.
Okay, I'm actually looking, but yeah, you go ahead and ask. Okay.
Did you cheat? Did you look at her question? Okay.
No, I mean, I'm looking at the feed here. Wasn't I supposed to do that? I realized we should be taking questions from afar as well as a jar.
Right. And Jennifer has a question. Ooh, I love the way she spells it, Jennifer. She says, Stephanie, on a lighter note, if you could live in any other time in history, when would it be and why?
Oh, that's a good question. Part of me doesn't want to go too far back in history because I don't want to live in a time where there weren't bathrooms. I'm not the camper type.
That's fair.
I'm thinking the 1920s. Weren't they the roaring 20s where the ladies had really nice dresses and pearl necklaces and feathers in their hair, and they would have big dances, swing dance? I think the 20s would be fun.
And why?
And you know what? Since I'm
just because the dresses?
Well, they just seem to be I don't know, maybe it's the movies. The movies romanticized the 20s, that it just was this kind of fun time period. But also, women were fighting for the right to vote and for equality. Ooh. And given that I just have this propensity for getting involved in causes, then I, could have dove into that cause back then. So,
fair enough.
Yeah, what's your answer? Was that Stephanie or David, or Stephanie and David?
This was directed to Stephanie. So if I answered it, it would be a question from afar that was not for me.
Okay, well then what's that jar saying?
Okay, so here's the jar question for you. And then then you can look at questions from afar and then question from a jar. Okay, this is another fun one. So, and since I was a Star Wars geek, what is a fun movie that you watched recently?
Oh.
This is going to be a good one. I got to write this down.
Yesterday. And I have watched this movie way too many times in the last year. So the movie Yesterday came out a year ago, and I have never laughed as hard in a movie as I did in watching the movie Yesterday, which is why I have watched it more than once and more than twice and more than 3 times. So it's this movie about this guy in England who is this struggling musician, and he writes songs and performs them, and no one's that interested. And this weird thing happens where there's this sonic boom, and for 10 seconds the power goes out in the world, which has this consequence which for some strange reason means the very existence of the Beatles and their music is wiped from everyone's memory and wiped from history. If you Google the Beatles, all you get are the bugs. You don't get the John, Paul, George, and Ringo. And so, except this one musician that was struggling to become famous, he remembers all the Beatles music. And so he starts playing the Beatles songs, passing it off as his own. And he becomes more famous than Ed Sheeran, who's also in the movie. And so everyone thinks he's this most incredible musician who composes all these songs on his own. But actually he then starts to feel guilty that he's presenting other people's work as his own. So, I mean, barring a few, some language things and stuff, unfortunately movies these days, it's hard to find one that's perfect to recommend because there may be a few things that aren't ideal, but I would say overall it is a light and funny film with some great Beatles music. And again, we're sensing my bent towards music, and so I just love all the Beatles songs in it.
Well, you've also made Jana Pinson really happy. Jana is the director of the Pregnancy Center in Corpus Christi. I had no idea she was even here. I was just talking about that, raised gobs of money through her online event, and she says yes yesterday. So you're not the only one who loves that movie.
There we go. I would also say Mark Harrington from Created Equal is also a big fan of the movie because just as you were a fan of Star Wars, his big thing is he's a fan of the Beatles. And so his wife and I watched the movie last summer in Ohio. Okay. Oh, look, Jennifer Nicoli is also a fellow Star Wars fan. So there you go, David.
Yes, the force is strong with you.
Do you want me to ask a question from afar?
Sure, because
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Stephanie or David. So we're gonna take this to David.
Okay.
What are your thoughts about embryo adoption?
Ooh.
So serious. We are clearly making a shift.
Yeah. So obviously there's a lot of ethical questions that are wrapped up in that. One of the big challenges is with a lot of current fertility situations, there are unfortunately methods that are not very pro-life friendly, and they will create multiple embryos in the process of trying to create one for parents who are wanting to conceive. And this is very personal to myself and to my wife because we struggled with a lot of infertility problems. And when we were presented with a lot of the options that the world has to offer, we were frankly disgusted and dismayed and said, we as people of faith, as people who are pro-life, we can't do most of these things. So quick side note, and then I'll come back and answer the question. So in our situation, we weren't willing to undergo anything that would be destructive of human life, anything that would go outside of the context of respecting the sacredness of human life and of the marital act and all of that. And so we ultimately were very blessed to come across Dr. Thomas Hilgers and the Pope Paul VI Institute in Omaha, Nebraska. And they are incredible. They do NAPRO technology, which is a form of natural family planning. And we were not looking to avoid pregnancy. We were looking to achieve a pregnancy. And years had gone by without any children. And so we ended up getting connected with Dr. Hilgers. We ended up going to Omaha. Margaret had surgery. She had polycystic ovarian disease, endometriosis, and ultimately they were able to treat her. And we were told that you may be able to have children, but it could be 6 to 18 months. If nothing happens, come back here. And 30 days later, Margaret was pregnant with our daughter, Claire, who today is now 22 years old. And she is a postulant at the Nashville Dominican Convent. And then we had more fertility struggles and then had our son, Patrick, today a senior in high school, about to graduate. So God is so good. Now, with that, what about embryo adoption? So because some of these fertility clinics have created many of these embryos that are not being utilized, many people want to just discard them. And that's certainly not an ethical thing that can be done because these are human lives. Egg and sperm come together, form a new, unique human life. And so no different than the process of adoption of a child, there are people, and there's a lady I know in Washington State who has done a tremendous amount of work with helping people to adopt these embryos and bring these children to life and to be born. So again, the choice of do you destroy an embryo, do you adopt the embryo, we always are going to err on the side of life. So that's my answer, Stephanie. Unless you have some different thoughts and perspectives on it, I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you not only sharing your answer, but your own personal story, which I hope will be helpful and potentially resonate with some of the viewers, because infertility is a very real suffering. And to hear someone like yourself and your wife, Margaret, who faced that but found a way to address the underlying reasons for the infertility and be able to have two successful conceptions is certainly hopefully an encouragement to anyone who's struggling in that way. You could potentially look up the Pope Paul VI Institute, which I'm also familiar with, Creighton Method of Natural Family Planning, and Dr. Thomas Hilgers, who's fantastic. In terms of embryo adoption, I have gone back and forth on that issue. One of the points I always make is that the act of how the embryo was created outside of sexual intimacy in a permanent committed relationship of marriage, that is wrong, but it's done.
Right.
So the question is, once that immoral way of creating a human in a lab as opposed to a fruit of a loving act by a stranger as opposed to beneath the heart of the mother, but once that act is done, the question then becomes, well, what is the most ethical response to this situation? So it's like a child conceived in a hookup. That's not how you should be conceived. You should be conceived in a loving, committed relationship, not a one-night stand. But once it's over, it's happened, the child has been conceived. Well, now what's the most ethical thing to do? Well, the most ethical thing is to carry that pregnancy to term and either parent the child or place the child for adoption. But doing an abortion is never ethical. So we can see that you can be created in a set of circumstances that are not the ideal, which are not how it should be. But who is created is still made in God's image. Who is created is still unrepeatable and irreplaceable and not to be respected. In the case of embryo adoption, what I've started to think about is the challenge that arises if you have a married couple that pursue embryo adoption. By having the embryo implanted in the woman's uterus, they essentially are creating a situation where they cannot biologically conceive their own children for 9+ months because of the orphan embryo that is basically occupying the mother's uterus. And I think there's some ethical questions that theologians and ethicists have to wrestle with, which is that appropriate to basically close your womb off from being able to create offspring with your spouse? Or should you actually not do that? So it's like if you adopt a born child, then you could still conceive your own child. But if you adopt a frozen embryo, there's a good period of time where you can't conceive your own child. And then someone might say, well, what about couples that have infertility that seems to be unresolved and they can't seem to correct it? So maybe in that case, there would be a little more of an indicator that would be ethical. But there's so much to that debate. I'm only just giving the tip of the iceberg. But in my experience of starting to dive into the issue, I've certainly dove more into the issue on in vitro fertilization in general. So if people go to my website, loveunleasheslife.com, I've written a whole series on IVF and why IVF ought to be rejected. I have yet to publicly write a whole series on what is the ethical response to the frozen embryo situation, because I hear these differing perspectives. One saying, well, we just need to rescue them. And the other one saying, well, we do need to rescue them, but we can only do ethical things. And is it ethical to occupy your womb in that particular way? So there is a lot there, but this conversation at least is a good start.
Your brain and how it processes and works amazes me. I'm always in awe. You look at things from every single perspective, you analyze, you break down arguments, and you think through, and I just really commend you for that, because I think the moment we stop learning is the moment we start dying, because all of us have things we can learn. I mean, I've had certainly people challenge me all throughout my pro-life involvement, and some people have really stretched me and helped me to grow in areas, and even, when I first was opposed to abortion, I didn't have the perspective that I discovered through Margaret and I in our fertility struggles that helped me to understand some of the challenges with contraception and the contraceptive mentality. And again, we continue to grow and evolve in that. I was thrilled to see in the comments.
Oh, what do we have in the comments?
Karen Alyssa says, I'm going to the Paul VI Institute in June. Yes, it's now the St. Paul VI Institute. When I went, it was just the Pope Paul VI Institute. And Karen, praise God. I'll make sure my wife and I pray for everybody who goes there. When you get there, they have a miracle baby wall with photos, and you probably won't be able to identify them, but our daughter Claire and our son Patrick are up on the miracle baby wall because not only was their conception a miracle, but they were really high-risk pregnancies throughout. So
wow.
Anyway,
Amazing. Awesome.
Patty's asking, what is Stephanie's website again? Stephanie, what's your website again?
loveunleasheslife.com.
Here, I'm going to pull that up on the screen so people can see that too. You can't see it, Stephanie. I can do things. I could even put little emojis and things if I wanted.
Maybe you're Mary Poppins.
Maybe that's my job. Maybe that's it. Okay.
Now, is this my? Is it my jar?
It's
or your
jar
jar?
time. It's your
my
jar.
jar time.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go for this big one.
Oh no.
Let's see what I know. What did I write on this? Oh, this is a fun one.
Okay.
In your travels, you have met a ton of pro-life people. Oh. Pro-lifers are often unfairly portrayed as not caring about children and those in need after birth. Who comes to mind, one or several people, of individuals you've met where they walk the pro-life talk not only during pregnancy, but afterwards?
Golly. I mean, so many people come to mind when I'm thinking about that.
I know, that's why I asked the question, because I've met some of the most amazing people whose names will never be known, and they might not be in a live stream, but they are just absolutely incredible and heroic and worthy of mention to inspire other people. So that's why I wanted to draw that out.
Well, the first answer that came to mind actually was not from my travels. It was right here in my hometown where I live now in Fredericksburg, Virginia. So if I can share that one, and then maybe something will pop in my mind of like the many, many names and faces I just am flooding through my brain thinking about this. The one locally is a woman named Kathleen Wilson. And Kathleen is, in my opinion, as close to a saint as a living person can be. Kathleen and her husband have several biological children, and they have adopted many, many other children. And from internationally, children with challenges, children, they've had, I don't remember the number, 11 or 12 children in their home. And Kathleen started a ministry, helped to start with a group of ladies, a ministry called Mary Shelter. And this is fresh on my mind because I just helped them do an online event earlier this evening, Stephanie. But she essentially said, I've been so blessed, and the children in our home have been so blessed, how can we help others? And so she now has multiple homes that house pregnant mothers and their born children, if they have any, and help them carry to term with their children, teach them life skills. And they've helped over the years more than 400 mothers through these homes. They've been in business now, I think, about a decade. I don't remember the exact time frame. Kathleen, for most of that time, ran this ministry while also running her family without getting a nickel of payment. And finally, her board of directors said, no, you have to take payment. For years, I mean, she was doing what would probably be a six-figure job in the business world, and she was doing it herself. And when I think of Kathleen, I just think, here is somebody that you could never look at them and say that they're harassing women or forcing their will. She loves women. And these women that are coming to the homes, I'm on their board of directors today, and I am honored to do so. They come from horrific situations. And Kathleen, her staff, and the volunteers just come alongside these mothers, and they love them unconditionally. They help them through their situations. They help steer them when they make some wrong decisions, which many of them do. But just the love that they have and the lives that have been saved through it. So when I think of Kathleen, and then I think of so many of these other walking saints, I mean, Stephanie, you and I've been to, gosh, I lost count. I've been to well over 600 cities over the years doing pro-life work, and I've met people like Kathleen everywhere. I've met people who have adopted children. I've met people who are selflessly serving in pro-life ministry. I've met people who are just very humble behind-the-scenes servants. And these are people that I think their reward's going to be very great in heaven, because they are talking the talk, but more importantly, they're walking the walk. So those are the people that just inspire me and challenge me to continue to find more ways that I can help to make a difference.
Awesome. Yeah, and I absolutely agree with you that you've just named Kathleen, but everywhere you've gone and everywhere I've gone, it's the exact same thing. I meet people like that in communities all over, and that's one of the great rewards of my work, is being able to meet such inspiring individuals who are really being Christ's hands and feet, and it's truly remarkable.
So I guess it's my turn. No, wait.
Yes.
Let's see if there's any questions from afar real quick.
All right.
Oh no, somebody asked me, how are you getting your hair cut during quarantine?
I need to get my roots done.
Clearly I do as well. I've needed to get my roots done for a long time. Barry, let's just say that in Virginia, there are certain ways that you can, if you are very close friends with somebody who does cut hair and they're able to do it in their home and you take the right precautions, you can still get your hair cut. And I did. So I've only gotten one haircut since the beginning of lockdown.
But no names will be named.
No names will be named, because we don't want our governor's not, been very friendly to people during the midst of this. So anyway, all right. So a question from the jar. I'm sorry, I got distracted.
Yeah.
Am I right?
I know I have so many questions here. Are we gonna? I don't know if we're gonna get through all my questions.
Well, if need be, like I don't want to keep people here all night, especially we got to get back to friends and family and other things. But let's see. Wait. I have one. Am I allowed to?
You're just,
I can't do that? I had one I really wanted. There's one I really wanted to ask. Here it is.
Okay.
It was the second one I picked out. So I'll hold that one as next. Okay. This is a very important one.
All right.
I'm going
serious or light?
You'll have to determine.
Okay.
On the fly.
Okay.
Stephanie Gray.
Yes, David B. Wright.
What is the proper pronunciation of the word spelled SORRY? And we're going to let the audience judge if you get the proper pronunciation. SORRY.
I feel like I'm on Jeopardy. Da, na, 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 na. Well, the proper pronunciation of SORRY is sorry.
What? Wait.
What would you say the proper pronunciation is?
Sorry. I'm sorry.
No, it's an O, not an A. See, this is what Americans do. Americans make it sound like it's SARRY and say sorry, but it's SORRY, so it should be sorry. And so the question is, how am I doing here on this chat?
Okay, everybody, how would they spell it? How would they say which one? How about just put American pronunciation or Canadian pronunciation?
There we go.
And we'll take a vote.
To be
Everybody
for each of our respective countries right now.
There you go. All right. So does anybody have any pronunciation things yet? Is everybody asleep by now?
It's a short O. What is a short O? So Lorda Mira 3 says it's a short O, but did I say the short O or did you say a short O?
Sorry, it's a short O instead of a long swore. So what is swore? What, like, I can't even get my mouth. Sorry. I can't even get my mouth to do that. Okay. Well, that was.
Okay. That means it's my turn to ask you a question from a jar. Okay.
It is. And Lord Amira says, I have to get a Floby. I want to know what a Floby is. Maybe it's for my hair. I don't even know. Okay.
David, what are your gray hairs more of a result from?
Okay.
Facing external challenges from the pro-abortion movement or internal challenges from within the pro-life movement?
Ooh.
Or that thing called age.
Well, we'll just, Kristen Hawkins from Students for Life, she said, David, you should be proud. You're the pro-life silver fox, which I think that's a compliment. I'm not quite sure. So I'll just say that, yeah. Where do my gray hairs come from? I won't say my kids because that would probably cause them, serious heartburn and they would give me grief about that. So I would not say that, particularly during a live stream. I would never say it's my kids. So the other two factors, honestly, I have more gray hairs from pro-lifers, hands down. I have met, I expect the people who advocate for abortion to be hostile, challenging. I expect that. But pro-lifers who were all supposed to work together, we're supposed to collaborate and get along and everything else. And oh my word, it can be challenging at times. So yes, I've said to organizations, when I've worked with closely, and even when I led 40 Days for Life and other groups, I've always said, yeah, I have more gray hairs from the pro-lifers than I do from the abortion advocates by far. And but yet we love pro-lifers. We really do love them. They just can occasionally
they are in that
cause
category.
Challenges. Exactly.
Well, I think it actually, in his, seriousness, it's just a reminder that Satan works to divide and that he doesn't want pro-lifers or the church to be united because obviously united we stand, we are a stronger force that way. And it's also why I think what is more hurtful, when a stranger hurts you or when a family member hurts you? It's just kind of that idea that where there's a closer connection, where there's a like-mindedness, we expect more camaraderie and a spirit of brotherhood. And certainly there has been a lot of that in the pro-life movement. I think just as you and I have spoken about the amazing pro-lifers that we have met in the various organizations we've worked for, I think we both have seen a lot of great camaraderie and spirit of brotherhood. But there certainly are those challenging times where there can be conflict from within, and that's never ideal. Dr. Martin Luther King talked about that in his letter from Birmingham jail, where clergymen were in agreement with Dr. King that the Black people should be considered equal to white people, but they disagreed with his tactics. And that was a great cause of suffering for Dr. King. So anyways.
Well, important question from afar. Stephanie, do you say soda pop, or pop? Or as my friends in Texas say, everything's a Coke, even if it's a Dr. Pepper or a Sprite. So what do you say?
I say pop.
You say pop.
I don't say soda.
Okay.
Unless I'm referring to baking soda.
Okay. And by the way, we do have another vote from Patty Hunter for the Canadian pronunciation of
am I winning? Is Canada winning right now?
It depends, Lord Admiral, whatever short O means. We were not quite sure. And then vowels don't matter in English. Oh, Floby is a hair cutter. Now I know. Okay. All right. So
whose turn is it? I keep getting confused. Oh, I just asked you. It's your turn to ask me.
Okay. Yep. So I asked a question from afar. And I'm actually down to just, I think, 3 or 4 questions. So
really? How did that? Maybe I had more questions for you.
I'm sure. You're probably trying to stump me. You're probably saving this zinger for the end.
Zinger.
Oh.
Oh,
Stephanie.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
You're about to be. Stephanie, what is your favorite musical instrument to play? And do you happen to have it nearby? And if so, can you play us a song?
Okay. So, almost my whole life, starting when I was 9 years old. Actually, starting when I was 7 years old, I began to play the piano, quit for a little bit, returned at the age of 9, excelled and did classical training and played for many years. But a few years ago, 2016 to be precise, I discovered the best instrument ever, which is the ukulele. And yes, I know this is going to appear as a setup, but I have my ukulele with me. Now, I will say...
You take it everywhere. You have it with you everywhere.
I do. And let me tell you that I just got an email from ADF International, Alliance Defending Freedom, an amazing organization that I've worked with for years. And they're preparing a magazine, and they were interviewing some of their different faculty over the years, of which I'm one. And one of their questions was, what is a unique item you always travel with? And no joke, that unique item is my ukulele. And so this is what I would say is the best instrument ever that I love to play. I have two. So what I have next to me is my soprano ukulele. It's a pineapple shape. This is Little Joy. I also have Big Joy, which is my concert ukulele.
This is great.
What a great sound, right? I mean, we could just turn this into a pro-life sing-along, but I mean, what could we do here? Should we do a song? Or at least
because we're live streaming, the risk is if you go too long on any song, you'll probably get a copyright violation because you're using copyrighted music. So I would say maybe you could do a little, what do you call it, where you mix up a little...
A medley?
A medley.
I have to do a medley.
All right. You're on the spot.
When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we'll see. Is a burning thing, little Johnny Cash, and it makes a fiery ring. Bound by wild desire, I fell in a ring of fire. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy. I'm Stephanie Gray.
Anybody who bailed out of Questions from a Jar before this missed the entire event. This was worth it all.
They missed out. Let me tell you, there's a story that goes along with this.
Okay.
So in October, again, always traveling with Little Joy, I spoke in Tyler, Texas at an event where Bishop Strickland was. And Bishop Strickland, shout out to Bishop Strickland, who is an amazing bishop in your great country. And so I had a meeting with him prior to my talk. And so we're just chit-chatting and getting to know each other. And then I ask him if he's musical and likes music. And before you know it, yes, I am pulling out my ukulele. And yes, I'm jamming along on my ukulele while Bishop Strickland is singing with me. So at the event itself, where we're seated next to each other, I said, Your Grace, at the end of the night, will you get on stage with me and we do a little performance? So he is such a good sport. And in front of, like, it was at least 250, maybe 500 people. At the end of the night, we got up on stage. He went for it. And he and I led hundreds of people in, I think it was You Are My Sunshine and Little Joy. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So I also am known for serenading my Uber drivers because, again, I'm always traveling with my ukulele. When I get into an Uber, you do some small talk, and then I can just get a sense if some of them I think would be open to it. So then I might make reference to music, and then do you play an instrument? And when I reference my uke, I'm like, oh, I actually have mine here. And then they all get excited. And then once I had an hour-long Uber ride, and I played the full way my ukulele for my Uber driver. And by the way, I have a very high Uber rating. I just want to say that.
Well, and can I also say, I don't know, maybe I'm probably not supposed to share this publicly, but I know that your Uber rating as a passenger is actually currently crushing Lila Rose's, your friend Lila's, because you play the ukulele and she doesn't.
That's really the reason why. Yes, Lila is a dear friend of mine and yours.
Yes.
But she is a dear soul sister, and it's on her initiative that she will prompt this competition between her and me about Uber ride or Uber ratings. And so she has said to me, "What's your Uber rating?" And then I pull out my phone and I look at it, and then I ask her hers, and she goes, "Oh, mine's way lower." So we'll put it down to Lila needing to learn the ukulele. She has a beautiful voice.
That's clearly, she has nothing else going on. She has plenty of time on her hands,
Yeah,
new mom,
baby,
married, running a huge organization, all those kind of things. So I will say that my dear friend Mark Cavalier of the Southwest Coalition for Life says, singing Johnny Cash with a ukulele officially makes Stephanie Gray the most amazing pro-lifer ever. Joined just in time for the best part. Mark, You got the best part. You skipped the whole first part. We had a technical glitch anyway, so you got the good part. Oh my gosh. River says,
Isn't there a scriptural passage about that? Those who show up at the end of the day, they still.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you didn't read Jana's question that just came in because she was going to throw it back to me. So we will just skip that one.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go for another question here for you, David.
Okay.
This is nice. What is one or several significant or pivotal moments that stand out in your pro-life career?
Gosh, a couple that come right to mind when you ask that. First was when my wife and I were living in College Station, Texas. I think it was before, in fact, I know it was before we had kids. And Margaret invited me to go to a pro-life talk at Texas A&M. Now, we were no longer students, but it was a public talk. And the presenter that day was Helen Alvarez. Oh. And at the time, I think Helen was running the pro-life office for the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. I'm not sure. I know she has been in that role, or the pro-life secretariat. But she gave a riveting pro-life presentation. I'd never heard the pro-life message articulated before that day. At the end, I've never done this in a public forum before that. I got up in line to ask her questions because I was so captivated by it. Today, she is a law school professor at George Mason Law School at the Antonin Scalia Law School. And I've run into her several times and been in meetings with her several different times. And I always tell her, honestly, she played a pivotal role in getting me involved in the pro-life movement because she, and this is why, Stephanie, what you do and the people who do similar work, those who go out and articulate the pro-life message, you never know who you're going to light a fire amongst. Mm-hmm. You never know who's going to be a new leader, a new advocate, a new person doing this. So that was one of the moments. Another moment that comes right to mind was it was June 26, 2001. I'll never forget the date. I had been volunteering for our little local pro-life group for a few years. We had opened, after Planned Parenthood opened an abortion center in Bryan, College Station, Texas, the center that Abby Johnson eventually directed. And I got frustrated volunteering at this pro-life group because it seemed like the abortion numbers kept going up and the pro-life community seemed to be losing enthusiasm. And at the time I was a drug dealer. I was a pharmaceutical sales representative.
I didn't know that was part of your curriculum vitae, David.
Yes, really, I was just checking to see if you and the audience were still awake. But no, I was a pharmaceutical sales rep, and I was calling on doctors about 30 miles north of where we lived. And my phone rang, and it was my friend Lauren Goldie, who ran the local pro-life group. And she said, David, Planned Parenthood just aborted 10 more children at the facility here locally. And I was just broken. And I remember I just was stunned because that was a typical week at that abortion center. But that was the day, June 26, 2001, Stephanie, that I will never forget. I said to my friend, maybe I'm supposed to just quit my job and devote myself full time to trying to stop this. And I was just talking out loud, I thought. But then Lauren said, well, why don't you do that? And I went home and I said to my wife, let me just tell you what I said to my friend Lauren. And Margaret said, David, to whom much is given, much is required. We've been blessed. And if this is something God's put on your heart, maybe that's what you need to do. And again, because a friend invited me to respond to the crisis, 2 weeks later, I quit my job. I took over that local pro-life group, and that was where we started 40 Days for Life, and boom, just the whole story from there. So just those little moments. And that's, I guess, my message to everybody watching is don't underestimate those little moments in your own life, but also don't underestimate those moments that you can lead somebody else to an epiphany, an involvement, and an understanding of the sanctity of human life. So, Stephanie, I'd love to throw that one back to you. Like any pivotal moments maybe that got you involved in the movement or just key moments along the journey?
Certainly a pivotal moment that got me involved was, and I would say involved in terms of considering that my career would be pro-life work, because I'd been involved since before I could remember, just being brought by my parents to pro-life conferences and marches and rallies. But when I was 18 years old, it was January 1999, and I went to the Canadian version of Students for Life of America to a conference that National Campus Life Network was hosting, this Canadian version of this college movement. And Scott Klusendorf, an American pro-life speaker and now a friend and mentor of mine, was brought in and presented that whole weekend. And after hearing Scott speak, that was a similar moment for me as you had. It's like, I need to actually make this my career. I need to work full time in the pro-life movement. So that was a pivotal moment in terms of the trajectory of my career and my future. But just a pivotal moment, a significant moment that stands out is just some of the beautiful moments of being part of a team of people that were really like on the front lines, in the trenches. So for many years in the pro-life movement, I worked with the Canadian Centre for Bioethical Reform, a great organization. And we would go to campuses and we would do something called the Genocide Awareness Project and other exhibits that basically set up displays about abortion to engage passersby in discussion. And we started bringing, 20, 30 college students from Canada down to Florida for a week to go to different Florida campuses and do this outreach. And just the camaraderie of the 20 to 30 young people that we had traveling with us. We would train them, we would do meals together. It felt like the early church. And then we'd go to campus and we'd have all these intense debates with college students. Then we would come together, we would share all of our stories. And I remember there were several nights where we that night as a team, or that night, an evening after a day of activity, would pray together, and we would sing praise and worship, or we would sing hymns, classic hymns. There was one night where one of our team members just was gently strumming a guitar, and the team was quiet, but as they were so inspired with their memory, they would name someone they had met that day that they wanted to bring to prayer, some student that they'd had a conversation with. And as he's, strumming the guitar, team member after team member is saying names, and where they forgot names, they're like the girl with the curly hair, the guy with the black backpack on, and all these students that we had ministered to really were then being prayed for, unbeknownst to them, by these peers of theirs, these other students that had done pro-life outreach to these campus students that day. So yeah, that stands out.
Stephanie, can I just throw one other thought, just as a final thought on this? I was thinking as you were talking, and you and I have been blessed to have an experience that a lot of people have not had, which is traveling all around the world doing pro-life work. And I will never forget the times when I first started going to particularly non-English speaking countries and seeing people doing the same exact things, and realizing that we're part of this big, many different parts, but one great body. And one of the moments that was profound for me was when our whole family went to Croatia. And at the time, that was the fastest international growth we were having at 40 Days for Life. And so I went over there and met with the guy, Ante Čaukažić, who ran the campaigns throughout the country. Amazing young guy. But we went to the city of Vukovar. And Vukovar, back in the Balkan conflict, was the city that was hardest hit in the strife between Croatia and Serbia, and it was right on the Danube River. And you could still feel a lot of the darkness in that city of the conflict, because it was still very bitter, and people felt it. Yeah, I met people who had been prisoners of war. I met one of the people praying outside of the place where abortions were happening, had been raped by enemy combatants. I mean, it was horrific. But to go and gather outside of the hospital where abortions are performed there, and there were 100 people praying together outside with signs that said "Četrdeset dana za život," which was 40 Days for Life in Croatian. And then from there, they took me to a house, and I met a young woman who just a few months earlier had gone to that facility to have an abortion, but those people praying outside offered to help her. And she changed her mind, and she stopped, and she chose life, and they came alongside and helped her through very, very difficult circumstances. And that day, through an interpreter, she didn't speak a word of English, she introduced me to her little tiny baby girl named Petra. And I got to hold Petra in my arms. And I realized here, thousands of miles away from where I live in Virginia, in the United States, from British Columbia, from wherever else, here are people doing the exact same things, and look at what God is doing. And so that's another memorable thing, is realizing we are one big unified pro-life movement. And even though we have our issues and we have our divisions like we've talked about, it really is a blessing to see this spread out around the world. So anyway, long answer to short question.
No, that's a great answer.
So maybe, Stephanie, I want to be respectful of everyone's time here. Maybe we each go through our remaining jar questions. We each pick one more jar question, and then we'll each pick one more afar question. And then we'll wrap up with, however, you get to end it, because I started off with the prayer at the beginning, so you get to end it.
Okay. Well,
did we ever pray at the beginning?
We did.
Okay, I'm
But
so
there was
it's
such
before the
an
technology
interrupt-
crash.
Just imagine how much worse the technology crash would have been had we not prayed. Maybe we wouldn't have been able to get back up.
Bam, that's it. Okay.
Boom.
Okay.
Okay, it's your turn.
Okay.
I think it's your
I get to,
your last
now
jar.
I get to dig through.
And then your last afar, and then my last jar. Yes.
Okay, sounds good. Make sure this is a good one. Ooh, that's a good one. That one we've kind of addressed.
Oh, I see. That's a good idea. I guess we can fairly look through all of them and see which is the
Yeah,
best.
I'm sorry, that's what I was going to say.
Okay.
Ooh, there's 3 good ones. Okay, I'm going to kind of merge 2 into 1, if that's okay.
Okay.
So the 2 questions I'll kind of merge into one. What are you most commonly asked, and what are your responses? And the other piece of this, what
This
do you
could go on
what
for
do
a
you
while.
think are the stronger of the pro-abortion arguments, and what's your response? So I guess what are 1 or 2 of the big questions / arguments you hear, and then how do you deal with them?
Okay, I'm going to cheat a little bit. So in terms of what I think are the more stronger pro-abortion arguments, that even when I acknowledge that, I still don't think they're strong. I just think they're stronger than the most common ones that I hear. I frequently have spoken about the time that I debated a philosophy professor who made the argument that he would agree that the embryo, at least for the sake of discussion, was a living human person with the right to life, but didn't have a right to use another living human person's body without their consent. So the way I'm going to cheat is to say I have spoken about this extensively. So go to my website, loveunleasheslife.com, or listen to some recent interviews I've done, like on the Matt Fradd show, where I address that. But one of the other kind of stronger arguments that I think abortion supporters, at least on the surface, seems stronger, but when we start to break it down, we see how weak it is. But it can appear compelling and make the pro-lifer think, oh my goodness, what do I do? Is that point that came out a couple of years ago where some abortion supporter posted on Twitter or somewhere this thought experiment. Imagine that you've got a burning building that's a science station, and there's an IVF clinic in it, and you have the choice to either take out of this burning building a 2-year-old child or 10 frozen embryos. You can only take the 2-year-old or the embryos, not both. Which do you grab? And so the reason that question was asked was in the expectation that everyone, including pro-lifers, would grab the 2-year-old child, which then makes it look like we can't possibly think the embryos are as human as the toddler, because if we did, we would grab the 10 over the 1 and we would rescue the embryo. So if we grab the 2-year-old child, then clearly those embryos aren't human. And if we grab the embryos, then how cruel are we to the 2-year-old child? So it kind of puts the pro-lifer in this dilemma. But then what I do in responding to that is say, okay, well, wait a minute. Why is the person asking that question? And they're asking the question with the expectation that, as I said a moment ago, everyone would select the 2-year-old over the embryos in order to come to the conclusion that that means the embryos aren't equal to the 2-year-old. And my point would be that's why they're asking the question, but the answer doesn't actually prove that. If you choose the 2-year-old over the embryos, it doesn't mean the embryos aren't human. Right. There can be multiple factors that influence decisions we make in moments of crisis. If, for example, I change the analogy to say you have a burning building and you can either take your own child out of the burning building or 10 adults out of the burning building, which do you take? Well, you're likely going to take your own child. It doesn't mean the 10 adults aren't human beings. It doesn't mean the 10 adults are less valuable or that they may be killed. It just means that your emotional connection to your own child may cause you to prioritize that child over others. And so in the same way, if someone were to rescue the 2-year-old child over 10 frozen embryos, there could be other factors leading them to that decision, one of which could be likelihood of long-term success. You take a 2-year-old out of the building, the 2-year-old can continue to live outside of the building, but you take 10 embryos out of the building, will they continue to live? Are we unplugging the freezer? Is there a place to plug it into? Even if we do maintain the freezer, as we discussed earlier, is it ethical to implant those embryos in someone else's uterus? If we aren't eventually going to do that, then one may think, well, I'm just going to grab the 2-year-old because I think I have the greatest likelihood of success in choosing that 2-year-old. So when you break it down, it doesn't actually prove what the abortion supporter wants. In terms of the first question, what am I most commonly asked? I would say that pretty much in every conversation or presentation, someone asks me about pregnancy from rape and abortion, therefore being justified in that case. And what I'll say is that I agree that that is a terrible evil. And we need to offer compassionate support to victims of sexual assault. A question I have to ask myself is this: is it ethical to give the death penalty to the innocent child? If we think about it, that's a consequence we don't even give to the guilty party. Even in your country where you have some states where the death penalty is legal, if someone commits rape, they don't get the death penalty. As I understand it, is murder. If you commit murder, that's what could result in the death penalty. So we're now talking about giving a consequence to the innocent party that isn't even being given to the guilty party. But the additional point I would make is to ask the question, will abortion unrape a rape victim? Will it take that trauma away? And I often tell the very powerful story of a friend of mine. I'm not sure if you've met her in the speaker circuit. She's a presenter like us, but that's Liana Rebolito. And she is a speaker in California, but originally was from Mexico City. And when she was 12 years old, she was kidnapped and brutally raped for days. And when she finally got free, they found out that she was pregnant. And so the doctors offered her an abortion. And Leanna asked the doctors if having an abortion would take away all the memories and nightmares and emotions she was experiencing. And the doctor had to answer honestly that technically the abortion wouldn't do that. And Leanna said, then I didn't see the point. She said, all I knew was there was a life inside of me. That life needed me and I needed her. And so at 12 years old, Leanna carried through with that pregnancy, not only gave birth to her daughter, but raised her daughter. And her daughter became her best friend. So I'm often asked about pregnancy from rape, and I think Leanna's story is one of the most powerful responses we as pro-lifers can give.
Wow. Well, thank you for answering that. And I get asked that a lot as well. And I think personal stories, for any of these issues, really personal stories are a powerful way to communicate that. Well, on that serious note, golly.
I know. Do we go to the afar? Oh, no, it's my turn to ask you.
Yeah, go to the jar. You get to pick you get to go through and pick the one last one. And then we'll go to afar for five.
I had 4 left.
And if anybody has any questions, this is your last chance to get them in the drawing. You got a good one?
Well, I think it might be good for. Oh man, these are all really. Okay, well that one isn't necessary. Okay, I've got 2 I want to ask. I'm not going to blend them. I'm going to. Okay. David, what do you recommend for someone wanting to get more involved in the pro-life movement?
Do it. We want to expand a little bit beyond that. In
the interest of time, David makes his answer.
There you go. No, I mean, honestly, I think for anybody who's here tonight, you're here because you have something you're supposed to do. At every event that Stephanie or I speak at, I always assume that somebody's there because as a person of faith, I believe God wants them there for some reason. Maybe it's to hear something I have to say. Maybe it's to hear something somebody else has to say. Maybe it's just to be around other people. Who knows what that is? I think all of us, when we look at this greatest human rights crisis of our generation, we all have a role. And so each of us have to say, what is my role? And so what I would say to somebody is, first off, yes, get involved, but really assess what it is that maybe God is asking you to do. So where does that begin? If you're a person of faith, I would say, get down on your knees and pray. Ask God to show you what it is He wants you to do. Then once you've asked God and began that process of discernment, then begin to assess your gifts, your talents. So if you are really gifted at, let's say, designing websites, well, guess what I would suggest? You probably could do something to help the pro-life movement design some websites, because I've seen some groups that have really ugly websites. If you're really gifted with communication and messaging, assess what experiences you've had, what's your education, what life skills have you developed, and then figure out where can I deploy those, and then look at all the different facets. I mean, you can break down, and Stephanie, you probably have your own way of categorizing it. I kind of view the movement in different clusters of activity. So you've got the churches and the faith-based activities. You've got the efforts on the sidewalk, the prayer vigils and the sidewalk advocates or sidewalk counselors and the people who are watching to enforce at the abortion facilities when they see things. You've got the pregnancy help centers, amazing, front line of the pro-life movement. You've got the post-abortion healing and advocacy. You've got the educational facets of the movement. You've got the legislative and public policy. You've got, I'm trying to think what, activism, just hardcore activism. I mean, everybody look at all those different facets and say, where do I feel where I would fit in? And what I always suggest to people is take a few baby steps in some of those areas. If you think, hey, maybe I should go pray outside an abortion facility, go do it for an hour. Maybe take somebody else with you so you're not alone. Kind of unpack those feelings together. Or maybe it's, I'm supposed to go give a pro-life talk. Well, listen to everything Stephanie Gray says and writes, and then go give a talk to a handful of people, maybe a small Bible study or a small group. But just, pray, assess your skills, and then take some baby steps. And I believe, and at least through my experience, that God's going to start showing you the way from there. If the whole old saying, you can't steer a parked car. But even if your car's going in the wrong direction, you can start steering it and you can get back and go the right direction and go where you're going. So get off a dead center, start moving, and then start steering it as God begins to reveal through your experiences, through your life and what you're seeing. And I really believe, if you had ever told me way back when I took some of those first baby steps, when Helen Alvarez gave that talk, or when Lauren Gouldy invited me to quit my job, or told me about the situation that prompted me to want to quit my job, if you'd ever told me the experience I would have, I would never believed it. But every step of the way, God illuminated that next step, and then we just have to be faithful in taking that next step.
Awesome. That's great, David. And it really does involve just taking one step at a time and seeing what doors open and what doors close. So thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess we are down to our last question each from afar. Ooh. And I guess you are asking me first, although while you're thinking of the question for me.
Ooh, okay. We got to go through the comments here.
I know. I'm like, I need to.
By the way, a lot of Stephanie Gray fans in here in the comments. I understand fully. She rocks. My own kids and my own wife, I've brought to Stephanie Gray talks, and they always are taking notes as well. I'm really trying to buy time so I can scroll through the comments here. There's
I know,
so many.
Exactly. I'm trying to, and there are some lovely comments. I just want to find the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you find one?
Okay. Well, I have one for you.
Ooh, okay. So I'm still, well, go ahead and ask it, and then hopefully I'll find.
Competition and the race is on.
Exactly.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. This is from Jeffrey Dobbs. How do you distinguish in your mind the line between prudence and cowardice when engaging others in pro-life topics?
Yeah, I saw that question in there earlier, and I thought it was intriguing. So the difference between prudence and cowardice. Okay. So just what comes right to mind is if something is on your heart and mind, at least weigh and consider whether you're supposed to have that conversation, and then start to process what that conversation would look like. So it's not cowardice to, at times, hold your tongue and listen. One of the things that Stephanie has taught me, and I have used tremendously in my pro-life career, is asking lots of questions. So many times, rather than just confronting a situation or engaging a person or kind of, I don't like arguing, to be honest. I don't find it very often fruitful. And I know some people view argument as a positive. It can be constructive, but I like to dialogue with people, and I like to get to know them. And so a lot of times, the very first thing I would do is, if I'm feeling this tug in my heart, and I mean, believe me, I still to this day, I've been in the pro-life movement since 18, 19 years now. I still many times am in situations where I'm nervous, I'm scared in a situation. I get on an airplane and somebody asks me, what do you do? And there are moments where I'm like, I really don't want to answer that. I'm a little nervous because what are they going to think? What are they going to say? What are they gonna, I mean, we're human. So I would say that, if you feel that tug though, where I would always begin is try to say, unless there's something you directly feel like you need to say, but then always try to say it in charity, I would ask a question. And I always seek to understand the other person before I seek to be understood. That's, I think, an old Stephen Covey principle. So, for example, when I have met people who, I've been outside of 400, 500, 600, I don't even know, I lost count, abortion facilities over the years. And a lot of times people come up and they're very angry and they start yelling. Well, I want to try to neutralize the situation. So a lot of times I'll just start to ask questions. They're not confrontational questions. They're not leading questions. Many times they're just questions to try to get to know them as a person. And something like, I'm so sorry that you're upset. Is there anything that we did that provoked it, or was it something else? And just try to understand. Many times just by breaking down that barrier, by asking a question, trying to understand. I've learned over the years that just about everybody who's ever confronted me, there was something driving that. Many times it was an abortion in their own past. Many times it was a family member or friend who had fallen prey to abortion. I mean, I remember some of my earliest dialogues with Abby Johnson. They were not friendly. She was on the other side of the fence. She used some choice words to me. But you know what? We tried to get to know her. We tried to love her. We tried to befriend her. And so I think the difference is, what is your heart? If I can use one quick story on this, because this really, to me, illustrates it. A friend of mine, a guy who was leading a 40 Days for Life in Manassas, Virginia, not about an hour from where I live and where I'm at right now. He signed up and was leading this campaign. And the first few times he went out, he found himself getting very angry when he saw the abortionists go in. And so he would be very confrontational. He would yell out at him, "Don't you know you're killing babies?" or things like that. And he started to realize that the abortionists ran that much quicker into the facility. And so he said, this really isn't working all that effectively. Maybe I need to change my approach. So he went to his church, talked to his pastor, and pastor said, you need to get away for a little bit. You need to get down on your knees, and you need to approach this differently. And so Ken did. He prayed for a while. And then finally, when we went back out there, he realized, I'm going to try to befriend this abortionist. And so he started to try to get to know him, ask him questions, just say good morning when he walked in. And all of a sudden, I think it was Atoka was his name, started to just stop and was like surprised by this change. And over time, they would just have little conversation, just a little bit. But one day, Ken and his group were outside in a circle praying, and Dr. Atoka came out of the facility on an abortion day, and he said, were you praying out here? And they said, yes. And he said, was that a Catholic prayer? And Ken was Catholic. He says, yes, we were praying the Divine Mercy Chaplet. And he said, that's really interesting because I was raised Catholic and I've long since left the church. And Ken just felt moved in his heart. Judgment, prudence versus cowardice. Ken said the words, would you like to talk to a priest? A question. Dr. Atoka said, I really would. So for the next 2 weeks, Ken worked on it, trying to get that all to work together. Finally, the appointment was made. The doctor went and met with Ken's pastor. And after that, he never did another abortion. He left the abortion business. And when he left, that facility went into a tailspin. They couldn't get another abortionist, and it went out of business. So because Ken, first off, changed his approach, did it compassionately, then he approached it with questions and with true sincerity, an abortionist left, an abortion facility closed. How many lives were saved? So anyway, long answer to your short question.
That is a perfect illustration of prudence versus cowardice. Great. Love it.
Okay.
And notice that when he began to change his approach, he didn't stop being present at the clinic. So it wasn't cowardice, like, oh, I'm just going to stop raising my voice. It was prudence. How do I raise my voice better? So I love that. Have you found your question? I was trying to help you out there by chitter-chattering.
You did a great job. And by the way, Jennifer, thank you for saying what a lovely evening spent with you guys from afar. Isn't this rhyming thing great? It's all Stephanie.
I personally love
from a jar, from afar. Okay, so the question, and there's a lot of comments, but the one at the very end here, LA says, how do you address the argument that there's no soul, so there's nothing wrong with abortion? I think it's a legitimate question.
Good question. If someone says there is no soul, and therefore abortion is justified, they therefore must know when there is a soul, because they must know, in order to identify that no soul is present, they know when a soul is present. So I would ask them, when is that moment? When do we get a soul? And then whatever point they then offer, I would ask them why it's at that point and how they came to that conclusion and how they can prove it. And the reality is they won't be able, if they say, well, at 3 months pregnancy, the end of the first trimester, that's when you get the soul. Okay, well, why at 3 months as opposed to 2 months and 28 days? What is it about that particular day in the pregnancy that is the moment where you'd get a soul? And how do you prove it? So the soul is really a metaphysical question. I think an additional point I would make is that it makes the most sense if we do believe in souls. Now, if someone doesn't even believe in souls, then there's no point in even talking with them. But if they do believe in souls, but they don't want to believe the soul is at fertilization, then I would ask them, well, isn't the belief in a soul a sign that we recognize the soul is what animates the body? So wouldn't it make sense that where there's a body, there is a soul? And the one thing we can prove very objectively and measure is where we have the existence of a body. We know, for example, at fertilization or sperm-egg fusion, that one-celled embryo or zygote is a body, even if it's just one cell, it's an organism whose body and genetics are different from the mother and father. So we know we have a new body there, and that body begins to grow and develop and mature through the stages of human development. So since we have a body there, if we believe in souls, wouldn't the most logical place to believe the soul comes to be at the moment the body comes to be? Because if the soul comes to be at some point after the body has been around, 3 months, 6 months, birth, whatever the point may be, then how does that explain the body growing for that period of time without a soul animating that growth? So if we're talking to someone who actually believes there is a moment where there actually is a soul, they're going to have a hard time proving that moment after fertilization without it sounding arbitrary. So the most reasonable moment is to say where there's a body, there is a soul, and we know at fertilization, there's a body.
Stephanie, thank you so very much. Amazing answer. And I was looking in the comments, and a lot of people, Margot, who's put a lot of very kind comments in here, says this was awesome. Please do this again sometime. And we may have to, because I still have a few questions that didn't come out of the jar, you know?
I had more questions too, and I just wanted to say, Little Joy says goodbye and good night.
Wow. Stephanie, any closing thought you have before we have a send-off here? I mean...
I guess I think it would be great to close in prayer, but my closing thought is just, kind of with what we wanted to achieve tonight was to take that approach of really talking about some serious aspects to the pro-life cause, the abortion debate, but to also have these moments of levity and to be a reminder that joy is a very important part of evangelizing not only the gospel, but the pro-life message, and showing that to be pro-life is to see that life is worth living and that life has joy. And so it's just my hope that with our fun little banter back and forth, that the moments that were a little lighter are a reminder that we all need to seek those out and make time for that, especially when we deal with such heavy subject matter.
Well, if I could, I'll share a closing thought, and then would you mind doing the closing prayer then after that?
Absolutely.
Is that okay? All right.
Yeah.
So my quick closing thought, just building a bit on that, is when Stephanie threw out this idea of doing this, my schedule was quite full. And so even trying to find a time was very difficult because of all these online events I'm helping groups to do that some experience technical glitches, some of them don't. But in the midst of that, what really struck me when she started talking about it, and she was like, questions from a jar. And I was like, what? What's that all about? But then I realized exactly what she said, that we have an opportunity to come together as friends and as colleagues, and in a way having this environment where it's kind of like you're sitting here in a living room or at a coffee shop table with me and Stephanie. And first off, you realize that we're just ordinary people like you. And in fact, we have some of the same fears and interesting quirks about us that every human being does. But also that we love you and we appreciate you and we thank you for all that you do for the pro-life movement. And if we're able to bring even just a little bit of joy, I mean, here we are at the end of our event, Stephanie, we still have 68 people who are here after an hour and 46 minutes and one technical crash. That is amazing. That's pretty amazing.
That technical crash.
So we just want to say thank you. And we appreciate, you've made our night a little bit brighter as well. And just know that we love you. We appreciate you. And together, let's keep lifting one another up through the lockdown time. And then as we regroup and go back out into the field that we have to serve in and continue to work until that day when no more children die and no more women cry. So Stephanie, I'll throw it back to you for the closing prayer.
Let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for our lives and the gift of time to get to know, love, and serve you and others. I pray that you will, your Holy Spirit will descend upon everyone who watched tonight or will tune in to the recording in the future, and that you will just fill their lives with your peace, with your joy, with your courage. I pray, Lord, that for anyone who is questioning how they can get more involved in the pro-life movement, that you will inspire them with the very concrete ways that you have in mind for them with their unique skills to be able to contribute to the cause of life. And I pray for all the conversations any of the listeners will have with friends or with strangers in person or online, that you will inspire their hearts and minds with words that will communicate truth and love, so that we will see the day where preborn children are welcomed, protected, and loved. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right.
Well,
thank you,
thanks,
everybody.
David.
Thank you,
Fun.
Stephanie.
Thanks,
Well, it was fun. We'll have to do this again.
empty.
American Jar signing off.
Canadian Jar signing off.
All right.
Bye.
Good night, everybody. God bless.